Okay, so we're ending. We almost got really, really close last time to ending this section on Titus 5 through 9, giving us kind of the purpose for what the book is about, or what the letter is that Paul wrote to Titus in an effort to help the people in the island of Crete, that they would be able to establish these new churches, set in order, and appoint elders. The next section, we're actually going to finish up this one and then start the next section. And we're going to see that although 5 through 9 tells us what we're doing, or what Titus is doing, we will then find in the next section the why you would need to do it. And it's kind of good that we're going to kind of finish up this concept of being faithful to God's Word and this sound doctrine as we start the next section, because that's going to deal directly with dealing with difficulties and sometimes difficult people and those types of things. Okay? So, as we said, the purpose is to set in order some of the churches, or establish those churches, and then appoint elders. And then he goes straight into what an elder would look like, dealing with the maturity and the reputation, being blameless. Talks about his personal life, on how he deals with those who are directly closest to him. Because if you're going to be in a leadership position, you can easily see how you would handle leading others by how you lead those who are closest to you. So, of course, that would be your wife and your kids, that type of a thing. Then he goes into the things that you are not to do: not be self-willed, not be quick-tempered, not be addicted to wine, which deals with control, not be violent, not be greedy, but instead to do. Be hospitable, be a lover of what is good, be sober-minded, be just, be holy, be self-controlled. And as you see like a pattern where a few things are mentioned, and then a level of control is talked about, and then a few things are mentioned and a level of control is talked about, and so on and so forth. We see that repeated several times, and that's because to be able to accomplish the things that we need to do, we need to be in control. So that common theme of keeping yourself, in control of yourself, reoccurs and reoccurs and reoccurs. Then it shifts gears, not really shifts gears, but it kind of leads into, I guess you could say is a better way of saying it, leads into verse 9. And that's where we kind of left off last time. If you're looking at Titus chapter 1 is where we are. Verse 9, verse 8 leads into, it says, but we got all the stuff that we're not supposed to do, and this is the stuff to do. Verse 8 is to be hospitable, a lover of what is good, sober-minded, just, holy, self-controlled. Verse 9, holding fast, or making sure you stand for the faith, the faithful words of those that have been taught, that they may be able, by sound doctrine, both exhort and convict those who contradict. Okay? So the concept there is that we need to really hold on to that sound doctrine, which is God's Word that has been revealed to us by reliable sources. And this concept of reliable sources, so to speak, is going to become painfully obvious in this next section that we're going to talk about here after we get through this, making sure they're reliable sources. But the reliable source that he's describing here is this elder or this bishop that's going to be, really impassioned and emburdened by being a driving force for the church, being in self-control and leading in a proper manner. The first thing that we saw there, of course, was that elder must be exhorted in sound doctrine. Okay? That word exhort means coach, right? We talked about that. A coach is there to kind of help develop, to take somebody from where they are to improve them to where they need to be. A coach knows how far a person can go, and he tries to maybe push them a little bit further to make them a little bit better, but also is knowledgeable about the needs of the individual, so that you don't push too far and lose them, and yet has to challenge them to be able to grow in what it is that they're doing. And then we get to the second thing, which is that he talks about there. And he talks about, so you need to exhort and convict those who contradict. Convict the contradict. That word convict is where we kind of left off for this last piece of the puzzle here for this section. Throughout the New Testament, that word that is used, that Greek word that's used for convict, has a specific sense of being able to show people, like bring to light or show people their sins in an effort to redeem them back. You know what I'm saying? Supposing you're sitting there talking to somebody, and this happened yesterday with my son. My son was eating something. Okay, he takes a big bite of something, and there was like a little something on the side of the thing. It's right there. Now, I could have just left him sit there with that thing on his face. Okay? And then everybody who's walking by would say, "Hey, that dude, he's got stuff on his face." But instead, I didn't do that. I told him, "Hey, man, you got a little something on your face." Why did I do that? I did that for his benefit, so that he would be aware of the situation. Now, once I do that, then what's the natural course of action? Now it's up to him, right? Now it's up to him. I showed him what was, I told him or showed him what was going on, and gave him the idea of a corrective action, and now it's up to him. If he's like, "Oh, I'll wipe my face later, I'll just let it sit there and I don't care," or type of a thing, then that's on him. You know what I mean? That's on him. Sometimes I have to do that with my youngest son because there's all kinds of, who knows what's on his face. It's there's a collection of things that he's had, that I don't know, and he's probably had it all day. But Paul's not here interested in winning any kind of philosophical debates with people per se. What he's saying is, hold fast or hold strong to the sound doctrine in an effort to be able to tell somebody their fault or show somebody their fault in an effort to redeem them back. That's why you're doing it. You're not doing it just to do it. You're not doing it to be spiteful. You don't just go to somebody and go, "Dude, you suck." Yeah, you suck. Right? You suck. And then, and then it's up to you to not suck anymore. No, it's a little bit more than that. You're doing it in an effort to try and redeem them. So rather than going up there and being kind of harsh in that manner, you might say, maybe the course of action which you took isn't the best one. Maybe we should, maybe should have thought that through a little bit more. Maybe we could have had an alternate, course of action type of a thing, rather than just kind of coming up and go, "Dude," that type of thing. All right. So he's not trying to split theological hairs or get into a philosophical debate over with false teachers and stuff like that, because these are people that contradict, right? So these are false teachers, people that are taking the Word of God and not portraying it properly. So he's not trying to get into a big debate with these people. He's trying to show them their contradiction, show them. And it's for their benefit, but also for the benefit of those around them. Okay? And we're going to see that in this next section specifically, because if you're going to grow and you're going to be able to attain that desire for God, you have to know what God's saying. And you have to know what God is meaning through that. And, like I said, in this next section that we're talking about, or that we're going to talk about, I should say, truth becomes very important. All right? The best lie is one that is covered with the wonderful candy shell of truth. All right? It's when you bite to the center that you find it bitter and distasteful. You're hoping for that wonderful caramel center, and it turns out to be nastiness. That's the problem that we're finding here. So this last piece of the puzzle is to convict. I guess I shouldn't write it down because I'm gonna erase it here. Is to convict, and once again, that word means to tell one their fault, to show one their fault, in an effort to get those people to understand what's going on, in an effort to get them to correct themselves. right? So what does that mean for the island of Crete? Well, he's trying to establish what it looks like to be somebody in charge, right? And then he says, this is what is most important for you once you get into that duty. Your number one function is to develop those people around you and then correct those who are unfortunately not where they need to be, right? That is the best, I guess, segue that I could come up with right here to move into the next section, which is going to be verses 10 through 16, the next 6 verses. 10 through 17, is that 7 verses? 10, 11, 12. 16. Yeah. 16. Is it 16? Because you're including verse 10.
Well, it's 7 verses.
Yeah, it's 7 verses. All right. So anyway, that's what this is this. So if you need to, take a picture of it or something like that, because we're moving on. Okay. Oh, wait. Sorry. So the next part is 10 through 16. 10 through 16. And this one is actually going to be, what do I want to call it? Dealing with the difficult. How's that? As in people. As in people. But it could also be, it also can encompass situations also, I guess you could say. Dealing with difficult situations. And those difficult situations, because they're difficult, can go one way or the other. If you deal with it properly, it can be handled. If you don't deal with it properly, it could escalate, right? So, standing for the truth. That's where he just came off of. This whole concept of standing for the truth, standing for what's right. He gave you this huge job description of what it is to be a leader, right? And now he's saying you got to stand for this truth. You got to be part of the sound doctrine, is what was told to us in this last verse, in verse 9. By this sound doctrine, you got to coach people and you got to hold people accountable. Is basically what he's saying. And defending the truth is a difficult thing, man. It is not for the faint of heart. I will tell you that right now. It is a thankless job sometimes, but it's an important job, and it requires courage. All right? I'll tell you, knowledge is beneficial. Wisdom is we talked about this concept of knowledge and understanding is, putting into action what you know, and we classify that as wisdom. Those things are great, but to have the courage, that quality of courage to be able to actually stand above and do what needs to be done is probably one of the most important things that we need to have. I heard somebody say that the realm of truth is not a playground, it's a battleground. And I think that's so true. The realm of truth is not a playground, it's a battleground. A lot of people like to utilize it like a playground because they'll play with this idea and play with that idea, or play with this philosophy and play with that philosophy, and they'll utilize whatever they need to bring about the means of them to substantiate how they feel. But the truth is that truth is a battleground because there is only one truth. And because there's only one truth, it is not subject to interpretation, and that's kind of where we're at. And that brings us to verses 10 through 16. That brings us to verses 10 through 16. We'll probably only get to verse 10 today. Verse 10. All right? Because this is what Paul says. Now, you remember, we're reading a letter. Like if you get a letter in the mailbox, you take it out, and you don't just read the end. You don't just read the middle and then read the end, then read the beginning. right? You read it obviously from beginning to end. Because as you read it from beginning to end, you start to, develop and formulate the ideas of what the person is talking about, right? Same thing holds true with these. These are all, if you really want to know what Scripture is about, start at the beginning and start reading it through so that you can understand the context of what's being talked about. So, given that idea, let's look at the context of what he was talking about. What he was just talking about was what? That necessity to stand for the truth, that sound doctrine, right? Against those who would contradict, right? For those who would contradict, those people that are a little difficult, for those people that would contradict. He says in verse 10, for there are many, once again, to gain this context, we'll back it up to verse 8 again, but be hospitable, a lover of what is good, sober-minded, just, holy, self-controlled, holding fast to the faithful word as he has been taught, as by many, that he may be able, by sound doctrine, both to exhort or coach and convict or hold accountable those who contradict. For there are many insubordinate, both idle talkers and deceivers, especially those of circumcision. Okay, let's stop right there. Here he just comes off of talking about how you need to help people out and also hold other people accountable that contradict, right? So in verse 10, he goes into kind of that description, or kind of carrying that thought of those who contradict, those kind of false teachers. He's kind of bringing that idea with him as he goes into this next section, right? And he talks about them as being subordinate or insubordinate and idle talkers and deceivers, all right? Especially those of the circumcision. We'll get into all this right here. But here he's kind of coming off of this idea that you got to hold people accountable, and these are the kind of people you have to hold accountable, right? This is what he's saying. So that's how he kind of introduces this idea into it, because he's coming off of what was doing. And this is kind of the elder's task. If you're part of an elder, this is what you're going to do, you know? This is your elder's task. Elder's task, that might have been better, rather than dealing with the difficult. Elder's task. That's right. Now that I'm thinking about it, that might have been a better idea. That might have been a better one. Anyway, so here we go. So who is the master of deception? Who is the one that is the quintessential liar above liars? Who is the one that deceives all who comes in his path? Satan. All right? Satan himself. Okay? Satan is the master of deception. All right? And the most effective lie, I've already told you, is what? One that has some kind of foundation or semblance of truth. Right? If it has just an inkling of truth, if it sounds relatively legit, then you might accept it more. Right? Oh, that sounds kind of legit, so maybe I'll go with it because that sounds about right. You know what I mean? And that's where the problem, in and of itself, where the problem lies, is that it can affect anywhere. It can affect churches. It can affect individuals. It can affect families. It can affect anybody, because the truth that is not solid truth. That's why you got to hold on to this strong doctrine. That's why you got to faithfully hold on to these things that are taught to you, because they are truth. Truth, once again, is not subject to interpretation. Truth is truth. Okay? You can't try and argue. I read a paper once on 2 + 2 = 5, because it was subject to interpretation by something, and it was just a silly paper that basically made fun of the concept that you can't subjectively look at things like that, because it just isn't what it is. Because during the paper it said that you could subjectively look at 2 + 2 = 5, but you could also subjectively look at it and make 2 + 2 = 3, depending on how you looked at the perspective. It was weird. But it was just poking fun at the idea that you can, if you want to twist the truth, you can twist the truth. Now, can can you twist the truth too much? Yes. Because the best lie starts off looking as it should, sounding as it should. And then you kind of put a little twist in there, you know, and it sounds, oh, well, that sounds a little different, but everything else sounds okay, so it must be right. You know, it sounds legit, but you find like a little tweak in there, right?
Kind of like what you was talking about Tuesday with the serpent and Eve.
Exactly. Okay? It's just a little tweak. Maybe our level of understanding is flawed in some way, or maybe we just take our level of understanding to a new level. I don't know that Eve was intentionally trying to discredit what the warning that God had given her. I think she might have legitimately been taking it to a whole new level. Like, if he told me not to eat that tree, then I should just stay away from it altogether. You know what I mean? I should just not even go near it, right? And she expressed that verbally to Satan, and Satan went, there's my foothold, you know? Because surely that's not true. Surely if you touch this thing, you are not going to fall victim to it. And sure enough, she went and touched it, and everything was fine. Therein lies the rub. There was a level of truth, and he twisted it using her own thought process, which is a lot of the ways that things happen nowadays. Sometimes, you know, in our church service, we're going to talk about the idea of complacency, and I truly believe that a lot of people don't, well, not a lot of it, most people, I think. No, a lot of people. We'll say a lot, not most people. I don't think they understand. I don't think they come about being complacent honestly. I think it just happens. Kind of slow. It's kind of a slow fade. Yeah, exactly. Familiarity breeds contempt. It just kind of starts to develop that way, and then pretty soon you're in a situation where you don't even know how you got there. You know,
like today, you know, nowadays things are changing, and you kind of combat it, and then all of a sudden it's like, all right, well, that's just the way it is.
Right. It's that concession,
right,
that starts you down a path because that concession is a foundation for another argument.
Or how people are changing words nowadays, like phobias.
Right.
You know, using it with other words, saying, well, you're homophobic.
Right.
Well, you know we're not. It just don't agree with the lifestyle. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Instead, change phobia is supposed to be a fear, not an acceptance.
Exactly. Because they want you to accept their choice.
Or concede
to their choice. Right? So they're making you look like the bad guy for that. You know what I mean? So they're changing the context of what's being done. Instead of looking at, like you said, the definition of what it surely is. I'm not afraid of that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I'm not afraid of that kind of lifestyle. It's an alternative lifestyle that doesn't coincide with what I believe, nor will I participate in it.
Right.
Nor will I, you know, condone that lifestyle. It doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't make me a bad person. It's just the alternative lifestyle that you've chosen.
Right.
It has nothing to do with fear.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But that's what people want you to think, because then you're going, well, I'm not afraid of it. So, okay, you can do this. You know what I'm saying?
You concede.
Yeah, and then you concede. And then once you concede, that starts the foundation for another concession, and so on and so forth. So that's actually a good idea, or a good thing. So the call to ministry. I think we all have this call to the reconciliation of God. We have the message of reconciliation, and I think we all need to give that reconciliation, the message of reconciliation to other people. We know that Jesus Christ saves, and so we have the responsibility of going out and telling people that. You know, it's not we're not saving them. We're doing what I said in the beginning. I'm letting them know about this option that they have, and that option then should drive who they are. All right, but it's their choice. It's not my choice. It's their choice. But yeah, I'm just the messenger. I'm just telling you what the deal is, and then you have to make that choice, right? So, So our lives, not just our ministry, but our lives in general, even the choices that we make, we are in a constant battle every single day between the life that is, the life that we have, and the victory that we also have through Jesus Christ, right? It's a constant battle. They're fighting in us all the time, right? Just on those, even on those little concessions, right? You're thinking, well, is this the hill I want to die on? No, so I'll make a concession, right? So we take what is and we take what we are, and those two things butt heads all the time. That's Satan. Satan is trying to do that, and he wants to do that. Why? Because he's trying to wear you down so that you will make that concession, right? And that's the crazy part, because no church, no person is perfect, okay? And it's the understanding and the acceptance of that that will help us to be able to move forward. Because as long as Satan is alive, he will roam about and he will attack the arrogant, the selfish, the sinful, the depraved, and he will tweak what needs to be done until any form of godliness or any form of goodness that we try to give or do or live or perpetuate will always be challenged. It's just, that is the true reality. So what do we have to do? We got to stand strong, right? He's going to charm us. He's going to charm those intelligent men and women into believing whatever it is that needs to be believed. And because of the lack of truth, and this is the big thing, because of the lack of truth, if you don't know where to stand, you'll fall for anything, right? So if you don't know that truth, all right, then you could easily be influenced by other people. And that is where he came off of his last thing. He's like, you got to coach people into the truth, and you got to make sure that you hold people accountable to that truth that are in contradiction to it. And that's where he begins, verse 10. Okay, that's where he begins, verse 10, because there are those who live and dwell inside of this falsehood. And he gives a dimension to it. He doesn't just say, hey, there's going to be these crazy people out there, don't let them have their way, right? He could have said that. In other places he has said that. But not in Titus. Here in Titus, he is kind of giving a dimension to it so that they can understand exactly what it is that they're looking for. Because sometimes you don't see it for what it is until it gets out of hand. But you gotta if you have that keen eye, you can spot it. So I think that's what Paul's trying to get Titus to do. If you're going to be coaching somebody and you're going to be holding people accountable against those things, you got to have a keen eye to see which one's truth and which one's not. And I think that's what verse 10 is starting us in doing. He says, there are many insubordinate, both idle talkers and deceivers, especially those of the circumcision. Let's look at this a piece at a time, because I think he's instructing his younger colleague, Titus, to watch out for these clues, and I think he's given him 3 clues. Yeah.
Yes, okay. I just looked it up, and I know what circumcision is. When it says those of the circumcision,
Yeah, we'll talk
is
about
that the people who are under that law?
We'll talk about that.
Okay.
The people of the circumcision is usually in reference to Jewish people. But I think it's a little bit more than that. Okay. And we'll talk about that in a minute. Because of the law. But we'll talk about that in just a second. Okay? He gives them 3 clues. I guess he gives them 3 clues that you can watch out for. If you watch out for these things, these people will identify themselves. You don't even have to identify them. They'll identify themselves. They'll
beacon.
Yeah, it'll be a beacon. It'll show that these guys are not the right guys, right? And he gives them 3 things. He kind of gives them 3 kind of deals here that you need to look for. The first thing he says, there are many insubordinate. Okay, insubordinate. If you hear the word insubordinate, what comes to your mind?
Rule breaker.
A rule breaker. A rule breaker, right? Somebody who's unruly, somebody who's disciplined, somebody who is not disciplined, somebody who's disobedient is what I meant to say. The word actually the word in the Greek has a dimension of somebody who is out of control. Now, in the previous section, what was one of the most defining characteristics that a man who is an elder or a leader needs to be in? Control. So the first thing that he brings up is there are some people that are out of control, right? There are some people that are insubordinate. These people are unaccountable is probably a better way to render that word, is people are unaccountable for themselves, all right? In Crete, we're going to look at it we'll look at how it looks at back in the first century of Crete, okay? But we also need to look at it for us as well, because you'll see that they're kind of similar, okay? But we'll look at it as it applies to, back then as he's writing to Titus, right? So individuals in Crete reject that authority. Okay, they refuse to submit themselves to the oversight of anybody else. They refuse to be held accountable. Why do they do that? Because they've self-proclaimed. They've self-proclaimed themselves, I guess you could say, as leaders, as truth. Okay, and maybe they did that because they've got a few people there that don't know any different, so they've kind of persuaded them or convinced them, right? And because of that, it kind of fuels their drive or their fire to be able to perpetuate that concept, and then it just builds them up, and then pretty soon their thoughts, their ideas, their philosophies become truth, right? These are the kind of insubordinate people that are out of control. They are desiring to boost themselves up to go beyond where they are now and have people follow them. This particular false teacher sets himself up as his own truth, as his own authority, all right? Which is a dangerous thing, because any leader in the church ultimately has one person that he has to answer to, which is God himself, right? If you find somebody, or if anybody is setting themselves up as the ultimate truth, there's a big red flag right there, all right? If they don't have anybody, if they've empowered themselves to the point where they don't submit to anybody, and they are their ultimate, they are them in and of themselves the ultimate authority, that's a big red flag, all right? Because they are out of control, because they're seizing control from other people, making themselves, what they would consider to be the source of spiritual truth, but really they're passing off their own ideas as truth, all right? Which is definitely a bad thing.
Well, that sounds like an ego.
Oh yeah, sure. Absolutely. It's that's the thing. Have you ever been standing in line somewhere and you're waiting and you're standing there with a bunch of people that you don't know, you've never talked to before, and you take it upon yourself to say, "Holy cow! I wonder if they need more people working back there or something." All right. Well, you're saying, probably what other people are thinking, you don't know what's going on back there. You don't know how many people are working. You don't know if they're short-staffed, people called in sick. You don't know anything about them. All you know is your present situation, and that you are, you want the line to get moving. You just don't want to be standing there anymore, right? So you express what you're saying. What's that?
You're inconvenienced.
Yeah, your inconvenience. You're expressing that inconvenience. Other people start agreeing with you, and now you become the voice of the people. Okay? Now that seems very small, but take that to a larger scale. If I'm saying what other people might be thinking, and I take that to a grander scale, and people start agreeing with me, then I become the voice of the people. I become truth. All right? And that then grows that, then people are hinging their very lives on every word that I say because, oh my goodness, this guy knows what he knows, man. He's thinking what I'm thinking, holy cow. He's saying words that are literally in my head. It's because we're all dumb. It's really easy. It's really easy to side with people that are selfish because we're all selfish. So, it's one of those things. So they set themselves up as the ultimate authority, and if they don't have any kind of authority that can, depower them, I guess you could say, or nobody that they hold themselves accountable to because they are the voice of truth, and they become their own truth, that's a huge red flag because they're out of control. Okay? They're out of control. Their only motivation is to seize power by whatever means possible, and they have no control over themselves because they'll go to whatever lengths needs to be. That means they'll fudge the truth, they'll lie, they'll deceive, they'll do whatever needs to be done in an effort to hold on to that reality, that truth. Paul never even did that. Paul subjected himself to the Jerusalem church for authority. He was collecting some money for some of the Christian believers, the Jewish Christian believers. He goes back to Jerusalem and he stands before the Jerusalem church and gives an account on his, on the road to Damascus and all the stuff that he had. And he even stood before the Jerusalem church in Galatians 2. And Titus was even there with him to be able to see that. And Paul holds other leaders accountable in that same way because there needs to be a level of accountability, which is one of the things that he just got done saying, is that you need to coach those who, coach them in the truth and hold people accountable who are not truth. Those kind of people are insubordinate. They're unaccountable to men. They desire to make up their own stories in an effort to build themselves up, and there's no accountability to them. That's the first thing. Okay, so what do I want to say? I want to say he wants to. I'll just do it this way, I guess. What do I want to say? Do I just want to put in there insubordinate? Is that what I want to do? I think I do, or do I not? Insubordinate or rebellious? Insubordinate. We'll just write insubordinate. 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 Is that right? No? It is, right?
That's right. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
That's right.
Of course it's right.
You forgot the Q.
Exactly. Insubordinate. Okay? The people that are driven to their own truth. Okay? That's what I want to put. Okay, that's good enough. Okay, second thing he says. What time we got?
2 minutes.
Oh, 2 minutes. Okay, well. Okay. Second word is idle talkers. Idle talkers. Idle talkers is a compound word in the Greek. It says idle talkers, so we have two words there, basically. That two words is one word, but the one word is a compound word in the Greek.
Okay.
So it's two words. So it's two words put together. But here in the English, they use two words to describe it. So I guess it's two words, no matter how you slice it, so to speak.
But not idly.
But not idle. If you can wrap your head around that. It's one word, but it's technically two words that are put together to make that one word. But when it's translated in English, they use two words. Anywho, the first part of the word, idle talkers. We're going to do idle talkers. Vain is actually
Vain, yes.
idle.
Vain.
Idle is actually translated as vain. Vain is actually a good word because that's That's another way to translate it, is vain.
Reading a different kind of Bible.
Is vain. Vain. Vain, right?
You're not reading King James Bible.
King James says vain.
It does say vain. Vain. All right. So, vain is another word. Actually, the word itself means vain or empty. Okay, vain or empty. So they just went for vain there, which isn't a bad thing because vain is good. It's vain or empty.
Isn't vain, doesn't that mean like vanity, like ego? Yeah.
Yes, yes. And the second part of the word,
Bad attitudes.
bad attitudes.
Well, I mean, vain.
Yeah.
You would have.
Your perspective is that you're better than other people.
Right.
Okay.
You know, because you're vain. Like I'm vain because I would consider to be vain if I think that I'm better than you. So that would be vain. Yes, bad attitude. The second part, Lego, of this word is speak. That's why they have talkers, is to speak. So that's why we get the English. We get the English word. So it's actually one word. It's one word in the Greek, but it's a compound word that means vain speaking. But when we translate it in English, we call it vain or idle talking. So I guess it's two words no matter how you slice it, per se. But it's one word in the Greek. Okay. The whole point of it is it's a derogatory term. It's a derogatory word. It's one word in the Greek, and it's a derogatory word that you would use about people who were not following truth, people that were worshiping false gods. In Ephesus, or in Ephesians, in 1 Timothy and 2 Timothy, when Paul was writing to the Ephesian people, or writing to Timothy to the Ephesian people, he talks about those who divert their attention from Scripture. And those who teach strange doctrines. He says in 1 Timothy 1, 3, and 4, for those things that are strange doctrine, the myths and endless genealogy, which gives rise to speculation. If you remember us talking about that. It's just that, vain talking. Just saying words to make you sound important, but it doesn't mean anything. But what was I just watching? Onion something. What was that? What was that on Netflix? Glass Onion. I watched it, and there was this guy who was like a billionaire, and he had all of his friends there, and he was saying all these big words, and the big words meant nothing. Like they meant nothing, but he was saying all these big words during, he'd be talking, and he'd say these big words in a very calm voice and stuff like that, and everybody just kind of accepted it and stuff like that. But one guy steps up and goes, he said this word, and he said this word, and he said this word. Those aren't real words. This guy's an idiot. He's just saying big words to make himself look good, but he's not really, he doesn't know any of these things, right? That's the kind of idea of this idol or this vain speaking. Okay, we'll get into that a little bit more as we go. But that's where we're going to leave off right there. Okay, any thoughts or comments on what we're doing or what we've been talking about here?
You were talking about how this also pertains to today's society, and it does.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, think about it. When I was a kid, they couldn't show a navel on TV. Now it's full nudity and sex on TV.
I know.
And it's accepted.
Well,
abortion is now just an accepted thing now.
Well, on the other side of that coin, I used to watch Tom and Jerry, and Jerry would literally just
violence.
and that stuff is not allowed on TV anymore. But curiously enough, you can watch cartoons and there's people that are same-sex related or that type of thing. You can't show anybody chopping their head off anymore, but you can have two moms for a child or something. You know what I'm saying?
And it's accepted.
So it's accepted. So that's kind of weird. But
How
violence is
we've
not
changed,
okay.
yeah.
But everything else is right. Whatever. It's kind of crazy. Anywho, let's pray and we'll get going here. Dear Lord, thank you so much for this opportunity that we have to look at this and just to open our hearts and minds to it, understanding that this was written, so long ago, and yet it still is so pertinent today. So, dear Lord, help us to truly honor and glorify you by understanding the dimensions of what it is to be self-serving. By doing that, sometimes that puts us above your word and your truth because we establish our own truth. So, dear Lord, it's hard for us to do, but help us to truly honor and glorify you by adhering to your truth and standing strong, having the courage to stand strong for that, even amongst this world that would have you to believe or to accept something that is untrue. It's tough to do, but dear Lord, that's what you're asking for us. So, dear Lord, help us to have that courage and that knowledge of the truth to be able to stand strong for you. Thank you so much for this opportunity that we have, dear Lord. Thank you for us to be able to look at this. Help us to open our hearts and minds during our church service. And we ask these things in Jesus' precious name. Amen.